Well, hello there. This is episode 2 of our Sewing Bee Natter, and I'm joined by two very lovely people. Let's start with our new guest. We have Dame Lizzie Curtis with us today, looking very ravishing.
My title, I.
Okay, we'll just call you Liz.
Okay.
And we have the wonderful Kim Solomon, who's here for another week. Well, she'll be here for the next 8 weeks as well with me. How are you both?
Lizzie,
Very well, thank you.
and I'm fine. Yes, absolutely fine.
Perfect.
How are you, Alistair?
Say again.
How are you?
Oh, well, I've been so if I cough, I do apologize. Just purely and simply, I picked up a bug last week from somewhere, and it has literally annihilated me for this week. And
Oh.
it seems to be okay just at the minute, but if I giggle a bit much, then I might actually go into full on but we'll see how it goes. I've got my water here, so it should be fine. So last night
Yeah.
we had this week's Sewing Bee was all about travel. So it was a very mixed bag. But before we do that, we did promise our viewers that we had a lovely giveaway. So I'm going to hand over to Kim to just announce who the winner is. Kim will email you to sort out your address. But what have they won, Kim? And who is it?
So the winner is Leslie Bartlett, and she's won. There's more than that. It's some of the dressmaking tapes from Vlizeline. So if you watched last week, Alistair and I referred to, and John referred to the bias tape and the seam tape, which would have made life so much easier, particularly on the twisted top and the jersey. So you've got 5 different tapes from Vlizeline. Thank you very much, Vlizeline, on the way to you. Leslie, if you're watching it now, I will send you an email if you can just pop your details over and we'll get them in the post. Congratulations.
Super, well done.
I know, but make sure you do it as a private message. You don't want everybody who's subscribed knowing your address. You might get some extra visitors during the next coming weeks. So the first challenge was a bit of a sideways move for Sewing Bee, and as they did say, it was a first, and it was a rucksack, which I'll just start off by just saying that literally when they were saying about how it's all about the choice of the fabric and they need something quite sturdy. Did anyone see the sample? It looked so limp on the mannequin. It was the roll on the top was just like, and I just thought, how can you say? And then the critiques that were happening after it about fabric choices and your own sample has got literally hardly any structure to it whatsoever. Anyway, what did you guys think?
Well, Lizzie, I think that they particularly picked that because they knew you were coming on our Sewing Bee Natter. Because can I just say that Lizzie has very kindly, for the full 10 weeks of the Sewing Bee, given everybody 15% off her pouches patterns.
It's the pouches section on my website, lizzicurtis.com, and there's 95 in there. And it's not just pouches, there's purses, and there's little bags in there, 1 or 2 surprises. So there's 95 patterns in there. So yes, you get 15% off. And I absolutely could not believe it when I realized they were going to make a rucksack, because obviously myself, I've designed quite a few, and obviously the ladies that follow me either online on YouTube or obviously on my Facebook group, they've made them, and I'm thinking to myself, my goodness me, what a wonderful thing, because they're going to be sitting there thinking, oh yes, easy peasy lemon squeezy. But of course, if you've never made one before, it's a whole new ball game, because it's they're very structured in a way, aren't they? Because you've got all the hardware and the straps. And the pattern was good, because the pattern was simple-ish. In other words, all rectangles, which is great. But obviously the added complication of the zip, which I think was fantastic in so many ways, a couple of side pockets, and then the adjustable straps. And because Esme said there were 2 adjustable straps, and I'm looking at the sample thinking, two. No, there's three. There's three. And that's quite a tricky thing to do, to get hardware just right on a strap. And everybody got one. No, that's wrong. Wrong, Lizzie. Some of the contestants got their straps the wrong way. Well, to be honest, they could just unpick that and move that round, but it's only that little bit of knowledge. If you know it, you know it. But of course, these people, I suppose most of them are from dressmaking backgrounds, although I think it was Tony R, wasn't it? Our lovely postman from Cornwall. Yeah. He made the most amazing sewing caddy. Did you see it when he put it on the desk? Yeah. I think Sarah put it on the desk.
Yes, it was the camouflage fabric, and he actually brought some of that camouflage fabric from his bag onto it. The only thing that was interesting that they said a couple of times, and Alistair and I picked up on, was that they actually practiced these patterns before, whether they've practiced their rucksack, but they did reference that. I think the fact that they have a bag, because a pattern challenge is just following a series of instructions, regardless of what you're wearing, what you're making, doesn't have to always be for wearing. So the thing that's always frustrated me, it's the Great British Sewing Bee. It's never been the Great British Dressmaking Show.
Correct.
Sewing is sewing, and whether you sew for yourself, for clothes, or whether you sew like we do, Lizzie, bags and quilts and things, you're still sewing. So I did think it was whilst it was a curveball for them, I think it was a good curveball.
I think it was very interesting because, like you say, any form of, whether you're dressmaking, whether you're quilting, whether you're making a bag, it's just a jigsaw puzzle, and you just have to put that jigsaw puzzle together. You have to have a little bit of background knowledge, obviously, as to threads, what needle, and all that sort of thing. But the one thing that kind of frustrated me a little bit was there was no interfacing to it. So obviously that's why he said more structured, because he's obviously in his head, he's thinking canvas, isn't he? And then some wonderful lining, which one of them did. But there was no interfacing. And I'm thinking, that's the bare bones of anything, isn't it?
And that goes back to, we've talked about this previously, even with regards to dressmaking, we know the interfacings and interlinings are there. Lizzy have had a massive input over the years on Sewing Bee. You know yourself, if you make a bag and it doesn't have the Styleville fix, which is your foam to keep it structured, or a Decaville light, which is going to give it a little bit of structure, even a light interfacing would have helped. Yes. And I think it was Jilly who actually went out. She wanted to use that gorgeous floral fabric on the outside and make the canvas the lining. She could have done. And had she used even an H640 of Lizzy H640, which is just a volume fleece, that would have just helped everybody so much. But no, sometimes I feel sorry for these contestants, because they've got all of this equipment and all of this haberdashery, and all they ever know about is the thread, the fabrics, buttons, add-ons, and they don't seem to get that education or information about these white rolls of stuff, as we've always described them as, which are your interfacings, which are the bread and butter of making a bag stand up or not stand up. And even I despair, Alistair, you picked up on it, that the sample was floppy. Had they used an interfacing, that wouldn't have had a floppy
no.
That's always been my biggest bugbear when we've been critiquing the Great British Sewing Bee. I'm always of a stat, if you're portraying yourself to be the oracle, or at the top of the hierarchy, you've got to make sure that what you're trying to pass off as the go-to sample, or the golds, we call them gold samples in the fashion industry. So we have a gold sample, which is a garment or a bag or something that's referred to, that any person in the workroom can go to that gold sample and they know exactly how it should look. But my biggest bugbear about that challenge was both judges were going on about the raw edges showing of the webbing. Now, the raw edges of those webbing, none of them, even though they were facing towards the bag, they weren't hidden. They were all raw. I mean, where was the finishing on that? I mean, simply, if you're using, say, for instance, a polypropylene webbing, which is it's synthetic, it doesn't have any cotton or anything in it. What you can do, what the industry uses, is they use these great big heated knives and they cut it. Whereas at home, all you need to do is you just need to be very, very careful. Just have a candle and then just offer it. Don't put it into the flame, just offer it near the flame and that will melt the edge. That will still give them the flat one if they didn't want to turn it over. But I just thought the pattern as well, when one of the contestants was reading out the instructions, I was so confused as she was reading it as to what they were trying to ask her to do. So hands down to them all. But I think Jilly's bag, for instance, the comment that Patrick Grant made, which was the fact that about the outer fabric, but in actual fact, she's done it in reverse. She's actually used the stronger fabric as the lining. Well, she would have done if she had finished it. And I just wish she had finished it, because I think it would have been a sort of like a kind of moment where you literally saw that this bag actually did have structure.
Yeah, it would have done without a doubt.
It would have been fun, but they had so many. I thought that was for the time they were given, because it was
three and a half hours from start to finish. It's not a long time.
It's not a long time, but I think also they were at a slight the time that they're given to do certain things. I think sometimes it's just always at a slight disadvantage, because there were so many elements. Like, for instance, last week they were asked to do the twisted top, and it was all about getting that twist. Now, if you look at that top, it was that and sewing it up. This week, the pattern challenge was an entire bag with webbing, loops and hardware and everything like that. It was pretty full on.
Take the time out to putting the zip in and getting that correct, and then and I know you said, Lizzie, it was a lovely pattern, but none of us would actually sit down and just go straight through. Would be able to take a beat sort of thing and check the straps and think about it and then reverse it and then do it. So I do think that's sewing against time, and I do think that, I mean, our row 2 was going down out before the transformation challenge was finished, bless her, because I just felt she was overwhelmed, and I felt so sorry for her, because given the right amount of time, she would have done a fantastic job. I know she would have done.
Yeah, well, the thing is, they've all come from, in my personal opinion, from what I gather, they've all come from this dressmaking environment. That's what they've done. They've learned how to dressmake either in lockdown, or their nan taught them, or whatever means. And maybe, I know that obviously Tony, we said, has already made a bag, and I think, was it Matthew had made a little or something. So they had a little bit of an idea. But if for instance you've not followed that path, that would be ever such a difficult thing to do in 3.5 hours. I think I'm really experienced when it comes to things like that, and I think you've got to choose your fabric first, and it's a bit of a bun fight. I always think, it's a bit of a shame there's not like 2 or 3 of the same fabric, because the people are pulling stuff out and almost taking it from each other's arms, because there's a bit of a panic. You've got that panic before you even start, and it's a bit of a hard start, isn't it, when you've got to have that feeling of angst before you've even chosen your fabric, and then perhaps they just haven't got that time because they're stressed to choose the right fabric. They're going for colour rather than what it's made of, and of course that's your first mistake. Well, once you've done that, there's no going back. You've got to keep going with what you've chosen, and that's not easy. It's not easy for people that are not experiencing that genre.
It goes back to what we discussed last week, and it's a shame that everybody doesn't have exactly the same fabric to do that pattern challenge. And really, even down to those major pieces could have been cut out for them, and that would have given them a head start had they been all laid out, because the cutting out isn't, don't get me wrong, I cry sometimes, I'm screaming when I can see fingers and rotary cutters next to each other, because certainly with the rectangle pieces, you should have had your ruler on and protecting your fingers, but never mind. But had they all been cut out, I think they would have got so much further, because I don't think the cutting out of that particular project was really
technical challenge, was it?
No, no.
And also, you know as well as I do, if something is really cut out well, it's going to sew together well, and it's going to look much more professional purely because of the cutting. But haven't you said about fabric, they should have all had the same. But that second challenge with the windbreak, I thought was fascinating. First of all, nearly every one of the followers on my Facebook said that challenge should go. And I kind of understand where they're coming from, because in all previous weeks, as far as I know, it's always been upcycling, downcycling, or whatever it is, clothes. And you've got to have that bun fight again of choosing the clothes, and you really don't have a choice. But this week, they were all the same. They all started from the same page with one or two, was it, windbreakers? Now, I know the fabric is a little strange to use. Fascinating, though, very fascinating. But they all started from the same point. And one thing that my Abigail said to me was they've actually got yardage or meterage, whichever side you sit on, but they have got a flat piece of fabric. And that's interesting, and it's all the same. And I could see, as soon as I saw that windbreaker fabric, it's a bit odd, but you could see volume. You could see how that could easily be puffed out into something really fantastic. If you've got that sort of mind, it's all down to, are they designers? Not really. But so they suddenly had to become designers and think in their head how that would look, visualize it. That's quite a challenge in itself. But I thought that transformation, although it's a little bit controversial, and I understand that, this was interesting because they started all the same. What do you think?
I think, that's an interest. I actually hadn't thought about it in that terms. I must admit, I'm not a fan of the transformation section, because I just think it is a sewing competition, and rather than looking at the design, and I think this is where the show has sort of muddied itself slightly. It's not, they're not necessarily champion people who have the most beautiful sewing, and to see you could have the simplest thing, but it could be the most beautifully made thing on the planet, whereas then you've got some other crazy thing going on. Fair enough, I get the idea of it had to be sort of like it had to be rainwear, which, judging by, I mean, I'm sorry, but I used to have my holidays in Blackpool, and I'm sorry, that little capelet thing would have flown off in 2 seconds. Plus, I'd have been drenched in 3 or 4 seconds anyway. I just thought, obviously, Esme just loved the Elizabethan collar, and I was thinking, but this fabric, it wouldn't matter even if you bunched it up and just stuck a pin in the back. It would, the trick with that, the genius about that fabric, try and get it to lie flat. That's the thing.
But I thought it was really funny because obviously I picked up, like you, Alistair, I picked up on the fact that it's rainwear. The idea was that you produce something. So the ones like Tony again, he really does crop up in my mind a lot. He had a hood to his coat, which I thought, that's probably traditional, isn't it? Immediately you're thinking rainwear, you're thinking a hood and a mat, which is absolutely fine. But the one that won, which was Asma, wasn't it? I just had this visualization of a water butt, because the water's going to pour down into her neck. She's going to be
funnel
drenched. It's a funnel. Yeah, it's a funnel. And all I could think about was when I was a kid and we had rain butts in the garden, and my dad would be just desperate to get that water in the rain butt. And that was in my head, which, so I figured that although I understand why it won, but it really wasn't practical. It could not have ever been practical rainwear. Whereas the more sort of, let's say, boring raincoats that were made with the hoods were great. But one thing, sorry, I'm dominating, one thing that got me, and I think it could have been both Tonys that made the little jackets with the hoods, and I forgot what I was going to say. gone completely out of my head. But I thought that, oh, that's right. The criticism was about the size of the sleeves. And I thought, well, it's not about that. It's about looking at the picture of what's been made, the concept. It's not necessarily about will it work? Because if it was about will it work, then Asma's would not have won. So it's a very emotive thing, and it's down to personal choice, isn't it? It's got to be down to what Esme and Patrick think personally about it, which, you know, that's the way it is. It's an entertainment show at the end of the day.
I think, sorry,
Oh.
I think the whole thing, like you say, is one of those things. The transformation challenge needs to go, because let's be right, they give them a brief and they never really 90 minutes. How on earth are you supposed to do something about it? I agree with you, Alistair. Keeping that fabric down, it was harder than keeping it up. I think the couple of there was one of them did some lovely ruffles and gathers, and I thought that was amazing. There was some amazing ideas.
Yeah.
But to me, even I could have done that Elizabethan, you know, that big collar and stick it up. I mean, great, she won. I didn't think I did say last week I didn't think Asma would ever win a transformation challenge, because I think she is a very good sewer. And last week she was completely lost. And I think in future transformations, if she stays in, which I'm sure she will, she may be lost if she's given a choice of things. So yeah, it's get rid of it. Get rid of the transformation.
I think we're all coming to the same conclusion about the thing. I mean, yeah, it is a little bit of fun, and it is a bit wacky, and it's almost sort of like I feel that why put some content in if you're not actually going to score somebody against it, if it doesn't make up a grade, if you like, at the end of the show. It's almost like, you know, I mean, I don't know what else they could you know, get them to do, but it would just be, sometimes I just feel as if it's a little bit of a filler for the program, whereas in actual fact I think they're missing a little bit of a trick where they could actually at the end of the show, once they've done the two things, they could have industry experts on and saying, look, this is not the way to do this, or this is how you would resolve something like this, and actually give just a brief sort of like breakdown and synopsis of something that would be, say, more useful to people at home watching it. But then again, I'm coming from it from a couturiers point of view, and not as an enthusiastic home sewer, for instance. So what I get out of it is totally different to somebody at home. But what did you think of, so the very last section, the swim suit?
Oh,
well,
I think the brief was, my understanding of the brief was that it was swimwear, but could look is good on the lounger. Now, I'm not a swimmer. I hate swimming. If I can avoid swimming at all costs, I will. I'll dip my feet in. And so therefore, the girl that won, I can understand, because that's never going to get wet. But to me, it was either something that should be able to go in water or not go in water. And I don't feel if you'd gone in water with the winners, well, you wouldn't go very far, because there was that much volume. So I think the brief straight away, and again, going back to Gilly, I felt so sorry for her, because her bather, the fabric was beautiful. It was a simple bather. I know she made a little bit of a mess up with the bias binding, but it was the brief.
It fitted beautifully, didn't it, as well?
It was lovely. Yeah, absolutely lovely. Alistair, can I ask you specifically, because you're the expert? Last night they talked about scuba fabric and and the lycra. So it is a question that people will ask, because people can see on dressmaking fabrics that you could use scuba in a dress. So then why would you use it in the lingerie? And obviously some people used it as a lining, and some people just use scuba, some people just use the lycra. So could you just give the people who are watching this a little bit of information about that?
So essentially, scuba nowadays comes in so many different gradients. You can even get scuba crepe, which almost drapes like a dressmaking fabric. But the scuba that in fact it was trying to get her name, it was Mia who used the thicker scuba. Now when I saw that, I thought, oh, you're one to watch, because I know that you've chosen that thicker scuba. And the thing is, especially when it comes to the crotch area, there's no bend in that fabric, so that will lie nice and flat, plus also it'll give you a nice smooth finish. So essentially scuba was made to make wetsuits. Now there's a clue in the name in a wetsuit. So a wetsuit absorbs all the water, and what it's designed to do is when you've got it tight on your skin, between your skin and the scuba, it creates almost like a mini hot water bottle, if you like. So the layer of water that lies in between the wetsuit and your skin, it actually takes your body heat and keeps you warm. So that's the purpose of scuba that she was using. But now you can get scuba in lots of different colors, because the fashion industry decided they were going to make these really full circle skirts, and scuba keeps its shape. So it's a voluminous fabric. So it's a bit like taffeta. So it will stick out. It's very hard to control. But when she was saying she was using it and she was using the pleats and the sleeve, I thought, my goodness, this is just going to look so bulky. And it didn't. But one thing I found that I just couldn't understand was she actually, on the top part with the sleeves, she actually used it as the lining as well. And that tie, she must have had so much strength to tie that bow at the front, because that's like getting a bath towel, if you can imagine, and then trying to tie a big knot and a bow in a bath towel. That's how thick that would have been. But when they were critiquing, especially in the crotch areas, you'll see that people used lots of different types of, say, scuba and lycra fabric, and they all react very differently. But my thoughts initially on that challenge was this was one that they could practice at home.
Yeah.
And it was very evident the people who were winging it, shall we say, as to the people who had actually. Now, if that was me that was doing that, even as a professional, if I was doing a TV show, I would literally be practicing and practicing and practicing, especially with that fabric type, because that is a real curveball. And not very many people will have endeavored to make their own swimming costumes, because they're relatively inexpensive to buy. And the thing is that it's another set of skill set. Also, they should have been using a machine called a cover stitch, which again, in a factory setting, that's a very specialized job, and you're almost working blind. So for instance, when you're sewing on a cover stitch, your finishing is all underneath you, and you have to use your fingers to guide it through. Now that's a real skill in itself. But they were using, like we were discussing before, they used things like stretch stitches on there, which was really important. There was lots of things. What did you guys think?
But I thought, sorry, no, let's go first.
Well, like Alistair, they didn't use a cover stitch, or we didn't. Although I've not seen that before on the Sewing Bee cover stitch, because they are quite.
It has been on. Yes, it has been a few seasons ago. They threw a cover stitch in, and oh my goodness gracious me, that is not the machine. I've got one, and that's not the machine that I was ever. People were saying, don't know how to work it. So yes, I have used it before.
Okay, that's too specialised. I just disappointed, I suppose, that I didn't see them. I know they used an overlocker, because you could see some of the seams, and you knew they had, especially on the straps and things, you could see they'd used the overlocker. But it would have been nice not to have had any tuition on it, but at least to have seen that in action. I think you could see some of them on, on the desk, you could see that. So obviously they had, But I suppose, we're in the hands of the producer and editor, aren't we? And they're going to chop and cut out bits that perhaps they don't think is interesting. But, if you're a stitcher or learning to stitch and you're looking for that inspiration, you're looking for clues as to what you should be using, because people don't know, it would have been nice to have just had a 10 or 15-second shot of somebody using an overlocker on that. Because although I know you could use your domestic machine with things like Lycra and Scuba, but oh my gosh, it does not give the same finish as even if it's just an overlocker. So that's probably the only disappointment I had. And what Asma did, I did that years ago. I was asked to line a white swimsuit, which I was so happy to do. And then I caught it with my iron. I wasn't ironing it because you don't need to, but obviously as a dressmaker, I always had my iron there and it was always on. And I just moved the swimming costume. I'd finished it, totally finished it, moved it and caught it on the iron right across the tummy.
Always the same, isn't it? Yeah.
Yep. So I felt for her.
There was a couple of things that I thought, going back to, yes, the overlocker, talking about needles. I would have liked to have seen them on the overlocker. I wouldn't have used 4 threads. I would have taken my threads down to possibly 2 or 3 threads because you wouldn't want the bulk. You could have also talked about even flat lock seams on some of the ones that were heavily seamed. They used this is the Fram elastic. Now, I know this is what they used last night, which is an elastic from Vliseline, and it's chlorine resistant, so it's perfect in lingerie. Now, one of the things that they did, one of them, and I can't remember who it was, Alistair, I know we talked about it earlier, was the elastic went in wrong. So instead of unpicking it, this transparent elastic, they turned it over and actually compounded a problem.
But that was the Welsh girl.
It's Fave. Fave, yes. So
I think so.
That was a shame. We did see a little bit of elastic, so this is what they're using. If anybody's interested, this is the elastic to use, not your white standard elastic. And the other thing was iron-on cloths. Who doesn't use a pressing cloth when they've got sensitive fabric? So again, House of Alistair have the iron-on cloth, which is basically
yours is in the post, Lizzie.
It's basically a white cloth that you wet, and then you would put over your sensitive fabric, your lycra, your anything that you're going to have shiny spots, and then you could have pressed it safely. There wasn't an ironing cloth to be seen. I'm not saying that they would have this one. These House of Alice have definitely got these. But yes, it's just that would have eliminated that problem. But to a degree, penalising Asma for the burning on the front was such a shame, because technically her outfit, her swimsuit was blooming good.
She's a clever woman. It would be interesting to follow her journey, because but there's one or two that stand out that I think, like Mia, a nice young lady, and I think, because I see things slightly different in as much that where are these people going to go, and have they got the face and the personality to take them on to perhaps Sewing Street? Maybe that's what I always think. Or when there's the festival of quilts and places like that where people do talks and demonstrations, are any of those people are going to be capable of doing that? Because they will be asked. And there's one or two that I think actually Asma, I think she's got it, but I think Mia has as well. I think she's got star personality because she's a lovely young lady, and you know what, that's really where we need to push our push our people with the youngsters. They need to come through, because I'll talk about me. Us old devils have got to be moved on at some point.
Well, exactly. We've got to shuffle off, haven't we? But also, Asma's got, she's a breast surgeon. She'll be the second. There was a previous winner who was a consultant. She was actually heavily involved during COVID. I'm sure she was lungs was her sort of specialist subject, shall we say. So the chances of them coming onto the sewing circuit is pretty slim. Quite often the stronger personalities make it, even though they don't actually progress further along in this, in the Sewing Bee. But I do agree with you that Mia is a star in the future and somebody who we will be seeing. Lizzie, can I ask you a question? Because obviously we look at it. Do you see this as an entertainment program, that the sewing is really quite low down, or do you see it as a sewing program? Because I often think any craft on TV is marvelous, any sewing on TV is marvelous. But if you were sitting at home, never having sewed before, would this be entertaining you, or would you be watching it because you wanted to or interested in sewing?
I think any people that anyone that wants to start stitching, it's not the best program to watch. I really believe that there's the most amazing people and demonstrations on particularly Sewing Street, because that's a dedicated channel for it, and I believe that. I do believe that it is about entertainment, and I don't think a new stitcher would be that inspired, especially because again, as a new stitcher, they're not necessarily going to be looking at dressmaking. They're going to perhaps be looking at maybe making a quilt, you know, squares, just stitching those first few squares together. And we had that in was it the last series we had a patchwork jacket? So I don't feel that it would be enough to inspire them to go down to their local store and get some fabric to try it. I think maybe a lot more experienced ladies may have tried the twisted top from last week, because obviously that's like a bit of a puzzle, isn't it? And I think they would want to master that puzzle. Whether they used it again is a different matter. So I do see it as more an entertainment thing. And I think to myself, if I was wanting to learn something, so picking something out of that, maybe the rucksack, let's just go with that. And I wanted to learn as a newbie how to make that, because perhaps there was some people that I'm looking at, because I've got the pictures on here, they're desperate to make that. That would be perfect as a starter project. You know what? Go to YouTube. There are thousands of videos available on YouTube showing how to put things like that together. So if you want to learn more, there are those means to do that. So maybe it's a case of drip feeding little bits of an idea, and then, you know, you then go and research it yourself. It's not always easy, because a lot of people, depending on age, and I'm gonna be ageist about it, and I'm sorry if I upset anybody by this, but a lot of our aging ladies don't know how to use YouTube and Google and all of those things to find those projects. So I'm thinking of the youngsters again. They'll be hot on it. They'll be on YouTube looking up stuff. So I think it might inspire them a little bit, definitely. But I would love to see things like, you know, we talked at the beginning about stabilizers. You know what? They are the building blocks of anything you make. It doesn't matter what it is, even if it's a little tiny mat, you still need some form of stabilization in there to make it good, to give it substance. It's the same if you're making a blouse or a pair of trousers. It doesn't matter what it is. You need those building blocks. So it would be nice if they drip fed some of that in there. But I don't think we're going to get the education. I really don't, unless they change tack. But would they then get the audience?
Yeah. It's a hard one, isn't it? Yes.
I think they would. I think they would get the audience. I think it can be done in a very subtle and clever way. So, for instance, whoever's behind, and we know past people who are behind creating the actual patterns themselves. Yes. So these people do exist. They're not, and they're behind the scenes. So, for instance, you know, like on the Bake Off, when they get Mary Berry and Paul Hollywood in there, and they're having a discussion about, you know, what could go wrong. They briefly do that, but Patrick and Esme don't really give. They don't really give anything like rich. I mean, speaking from a professional point of view, they don't really give an in-depth thing about what could go wrong. It's just it's almost like, well, they might stumble at the, you know, the getting the hardware right. Well, okay, but you know that yeah, it's like, but I think there could be a happy medium, because it just, I think they used to do it on earlier seasons. They used to do it a little bit more, where, I mean, one thing that used to make me laugh was, for instance, sometimes they would give the contestants a bit of a platform, and they were saying, well, what you have to do is you have to do it this way, and blah. And I'm almost shouting at the television, thinking, that's you're giving people incorrect information. That's not how you do that at all. And that's not what bias cut needs to do. It's, you know, but it's, I think it is purely an entertainment program, but I think a lot of people who watch it, as we've seen from the comments from last week, a lot of people want to see more of that. But can we just talk about Matthew, please?
Right, let's talk about Matthew.
What did you think of? Now, I thought that swimsuit was more like a cheerleader's outfit than a swimming costume. So that's
oh, it's the stripe, wasn't it?
That's
Yes,
Matthew there.
yeah. Yes.
So that was the one that was done in I think it was the transsexual
transgender colours.
Transgender colours, yeah. So that was all done there. I mean, when I saw him, because it wasn't fitting on the bus, when I saw him nipping and tucking all these bits, one dart was up here, the other dart was coming up this way, and there was no structure to the back. I mean, for instance, I was saying to Kim earlier this morning, a lot of garments, for instance, all that needs to actually happen is you just need to pick it up from the shoulder and shorten it from the shoulder, because it actually would sort out quite a lot that's going on in the bust area. And then Maria, who had the side panels, she was quite right in what she was saying, because you asked me about this, Kim, before, about having the panels inside the swimsuit. And in actual fact, when you're trying to cinch the waist and you're trying to, we call it clearing. So if you've ever tried a suit on and you look at the back, everyone will be doing this at all the summer weddings now. Look at the back of a gentleman's neck, and if where the collar is, it slightly goes bumpy, technically what we need to do there is you need to take the collar off and you need to push all that ruffle up into the collar and then recut it and then re-stitch the collar on, because that fabric is telling you it wants to go somewhere, and that's why you start getting ridges. So when you start getting ridges and bobbly bits, it means that the fabric's telling you, I want to go this way, or I need to come this way, or I need to be eased that way. So the fabric's actually telling you what you need to do, whereas he was literally pinning and pinning and pinning, and it was just oh yeah, then he was trying to stuff the sides of the cut in, and I was like,
whoa,
there's gonna be nothing left.
Bless him. Oh, do you know what it is? It's just, it's such a shame, because again, I know they've practiced. If it goes wrong on the day, you're in that environment, you just must think, oh my, there's no escaping. Whereas at home, you'd go away, have a cup of coffee, rethink it all and start again, or you wouldn't necessarily be unpicking. They're really under the microscope, aren't they? It's just such a shame.
A fabulous job, I really do.
Yeah,
all that pressure of being watched all the time, and I bet anything you like, they'll do something, and some wise chap will say, no, we need you to do that again because didn't quite get it the first time, so they're having to pretend to do it again, and all these sort of things that happen in TV land. Well, I mean, that's another angle, isn't it, of the stress that they're under. It's not just a happy sewy environment, they've got all the TV crew there filming them, breathing down their necks. I think they do a wonderful job.
I do.
And what's the biggest golden rule when something goes wrong on live TV?
Cry? No.
You own up to it straight away, because there's no you just go, and it just shows that, even as professionals, when you're trying to demonstrate, talk, and hear somebody in your ear at the same time, and coordinate all of that, and then take direction from people that are waving and doing all sorts of things at you at the front, that's a really difficult thing to do. And if you've not, we've all grown accustomed to that, because we've all been doing it for quite a few years now, and but to go in with, I remember my first day, I was so glad to get off that set. It was literally, so I really feel for them. I really do feel
it's mentally stressful as well. And you want to look your best. Let's be right. They want to look their best at all times. They don't want the camera looking at them when they're, and they've got to contain all their frustrations as well. But can I tell you what this week's giveaway is from Lizzy, because I think it hits a couple of the spots that we've had. So we are going to be sending out some of the Fram Elastic, which would be ideal if you wanted to do any lingerie or bathing suits for the future. Also some edge tape. Now the edge tape you could use down the sides as you're joining your fabrics. It doesn't have to be in dressmaking, and that would give you again some structure to sew it together. And then there's some waist shaper. If you didn't want to use the webbing, you could use the waist shaper as an alternative as a bag handle. So that's 3 things we're sending out. Next week we'll announce the winners for that. So again, thank you, Lizzy, and thank you, Lizzy, for yours. If you want to learn how to make a bag, may I suggest that you pop over to Lizzy, grab one of our patterns, and she'll guide you through the no problem at all.
Videos, that's the great thing, even just those 95 pouches. I've got well over 300 things on there now, but there's 95 pouches, there's purses, there's all sorts of different things. But every single one of them has a video. So and I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's all very well. And Alistair, you said the same about reading an instruction, and somebody has written it how they understand it. It doesn't mean to say it makes any sense to anybody else. So video is really useful.
It's like holding your hand. It's like when you go to a workshop or a class, the ladies, they don't want to read the patterns. They just want you to tell them and guide them through it. And let's be right, we've all learned how to do things because we've made the mistakes. So we're not asking you to make those mistakes again. We want you to do the best. And I think possibly what's coming through from the last 2 shows that we've done, and I know we're just about to wrap this one up, is that we're frustrated for people because we can see how difficult things can be, and they're just given a series of written instructions, and it's not coming through that they're getting the support, and not everybody learns in the same way. Some people could read instructions, and some people are followers of videos or online tutorials. So
definitely 100%.
So did you think it was the right decision that was made for Jilly to leave?
I felt so sorry for her. Do you know what it is? I'd written down, I felt as if she gave up.
Yes.
I felt as if it was just too much for her in the first pattern project, because when Patrick and Esme came over and said straight away about her fabric, and if she'd only, I so wish that A, she'd had interfacing, Lizzy, or B, she'd got that flipping lining in, because of that lining with that canvas lining would have supported her bag. And it goes back to, on the very first show, it just seems to be Esme is really pleased if something's a nice colour. Yes. She overlooks it all the sewing, as long as it's a nice colour. And one of the girls, actually, I can't remember who it was at what point, I think it was the transformation, if I put a big bow on, Esme will love it. And you think, that's not really how it should be at all. So
I think that was Mia, wasn't it? I think it was Mia with the windbreak, wasn't it? And she did the big bow.
Yellow one.
Yeah,
you won it. You definitely won it. But
that's right. Well, next week they've got a huge challenge because it's African inspired. Goodness knows what's going to come out with this. The preview looks very, very interesting. There was a Ghanaian smock. There was Nigerian project, and is it the Boo Boo inspired? I think that was the final project. So yes, goodness knows what will come out there. We're joined.
I think there's going to be a lot of. I think there's going to be next week. I think there's going to be a lot of critiques about pattern placement.
Yes,
because
and I know who'll do really well with that. Asma will do so well with that, because on our very first project, on our twisted top, it was beautiful. Beautifully placed. Matthew this week, he was, Patrick did say something that was really good. Unless we ask for stripes, don't use them. And I think that was a good tip from him.
If in doubt, use the busiest fabric you can find. Yeah. You couldn't possibly pattern match, and it wouldn't matter if your zip was crooked or your stitches are awful, because that fabric would just about zing. Yes. It really would. It look amazing.
Absolutely. Well, Lizzie, thank you so much for taking time out today and having a little chat about the Sewing Bee. And we know that you're going to join us near the penultimate show. So we'll see how things develop there
Yes,
with the project. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And who have we got next week, Kim?
We have got Tracy Dennis next week from the Owl and the
Owl
Sewing.
and the Sewing Cat.
So
Oh,
yes,
she's a lovely-
Tracy dabbles with craft and dressmaking, her patterns. So it'd be really interesting to hear her views as well.
She also
Yeah.
likes Prosecco, I've heard as well.
Well, actually, I'll be somewhere where I'll be drinking Prosecco. I'm hoping to join you because I'm not in this country next week.
Oh yes, I forgot.
Oops.
Yes.
Lovely.
But thank you again. Okay. Now
It's lovely to see you, Lizzie.
And you, darling. Bye-bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.